We had the strongest economy in history. There's never been a country that had an economy like us. I gave Harris and Biden an economic miracle, and they quickly turned it into an economic nightmare.
Let's take a look at some of the facts here. First, the best measure of an economy is its growth rate, GDP growth rate. And so when you compare the two, and I have adjusted out COVID in fairness to both presidents, although you see it doesn't actually change the picture, Trump grew his economy at a rate of about 2.6% a year, which is actually not a bad rate, and that excludes COVID. Biden grew his economy, has grown so far his economy at 3.5% a year. If you take out the effects of COVID, the disparity is even greater. So I've done this as honestly as I can do, and no matter how you do it, it doesn't come out in Trump's favor, even against Biden, let alone against 5,000 years of other economies around the world. Secondly, you can look at jobs. That's a very important thing in an economy, obviously, to Americans. And again, I've adjusted out the effects of COVID. 182,000 jobs on average a month created by Trump. 271,000 jobs on average created by Biden. Again, if you take out COVID, the disparity is far greater. So that is one of his most preposterous claims.
Let's move on to energy.
We were energy independent 4 years ago. Think of it. Today, we're getting energy from Venezuela in the form of tar.
Well, first of all, we were never energy independent under Donald Trump. In fact, we really haven't been energy independent going back until sometime before 1950. You can see that the amount of oil imports that we had during Trump did, in fact, decline. This is part of a long progression that goes back to the mid-2000s. It's nothing that he particularly did. It continued under Biden, and lo and behold, the first time we have been energy independent as it applies to oil was in 2023 under Biden's presidency, when we actually exported a bit more oil than we imported. Now, Trump has hung up on Venezuela. I'm not exactly sure why. He usually likes dictators. In this case, he seems to not like it as much. It is a fact, as Trump said, that Venezuelan oil is bad oil. It's very heavy. It's very polluting. But look what happened to Venezuelan oil imports over the last 7.5 years. Under Trump, we averaged 10.3 million barrels of Venezuelan oil a day coming into this country. Under Biden, we're down to 1.7 million barrels a day of Venezuelan oil. So the idea that somehow Biden is the one who brought in all this Venezuelan oil is absolutely directly contradicted by the numbers.
Okay, let's talk about migrant crime.
They all said I was wrong when I said that migrant crime will reach epidemic proportions. And now it's much worse than that. It's a lot worse than epidemic proportions. It's beyond control. We have a new category of crime. It's called migrant crime. And I think it's going to end up being the worst category of all.
Well, you know, it was supposed to be an economic speech, but he can't help himself, and he has to get off into things like migrants and immigration and the border and crime and all that kind of stuff. But once again, the facts are not quite what he said. First, let's just talk about crime in general. He likes to think the country's in the middle of some crime wave. That is actually not true. Violent crime per 100,000 people has dropped 26% under Joe Biden, from an average of 398 per 100,000 people down to 294. What is even more amazing is that it, in fact, ended Trump's administration slightly higher than when it began, or certainly, at best, most favorably. You can't see any improvement under Trump's administration. All the improvement has been under the Biden administration. Now, there's the fallacy of migrant crime. If you read the New York Post, you'd think, of course, all crime was committed by migrants. But in fact, and we've talked about this, I think, before, but it's really quite dramatic. If you break crime down between native-born Americans, documented immigrants, and undocumented immigrants, you can see that native-born American crime rate is actually higher than it is for documented immigrants and way higher than it is for undocumented immigrants. That's true whether you look at violent crime, whether you look at property crime, when you look at drug violations. The fact is, immigrants actually commit fewer crimes than Americans. And for the undocumented immigrants, it's not totally surprising. They don't want to get sent back to wherever they came from, so they tend to behave themselves better than a lot of Americans and a lot of documented immigrants. So this is a complete fiction that Donald Trump has created.